This
Yeah, here I
conference will
can't
now
see
be
her on the
recorded.
screen. Are we quiet?
Hey y'all, I think we can go ahead and get started. I don't see any other folks joining. Welcome, happy summer. It's crazy that it's the end of June already. But it's exciting to all get together again. I think we'll start with introductions. So I'm just going to go down the attendance sheet. So Jan, hold on. So Jan, you here?
I am here.
Hey Jan. Sue, I saw you.
I'm here.
Harry? You on, Harry? No, Harry. Maybe he'll join later. Stephanie?
Here.
Ernie? Are you in the ether, Ernie? Wendy? Mike? Marjorie?
Here.
Scott? You out there, Scott? Scott Lehman? Nadine?
Yes.
Welcome. Dr. Porter? Dorothy?
Here, thank you.
Christine?
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, Christine. Erica? You around, Erica? And Dylan?
Hey, I'm here.
Hey, Dylan. And Paige? You on, Paige? Cool. Well, thanks y'all for joining. I know it's still strange to be virtual, but hopefully soon we'll get together again if that's something that folks want to do. I know I'd like to see all of your faces in person. So just to kind of recap, we currently have about 15 active CAC members. And Joe and TBEP staff a while back put out a call for some passionate bay-loving residents that were interested in joining the CAC so that we can get sort of a larger group to engage with and ambassadors that are going to be more involved. So we were lucky enough to have 2 individuals that reached out and 2 prospective members that are interested in joining the CAC. So first up is Elizabeth Nail. Nail, did I say that right?
Yes, you did, Nail, just as it's spelled.
So I'm just going to pull up her application. And Liz, if you just want to give a little bit about who you are, why you want to be on the CAC, and what you hope to bring to the CAC.
Okay, thank you, Sheila, and thank you everyone for letting me be here. I am born and raised from Clearwater, Florida, so I'm a Pinellas County resident from birth, and I went to UF. My whole family went to UF. Basically, I'm a Floridian. grew up around the water. I currently, I just moved back to St. Pete from Tampa, and I still work in Tampa, but I am also going to school to get my master's in sustainable management with a focus on clean water. And so I wanted to get more involved in local community and obviously in the issues that are going on with our waters around the Bay. I think I could bring just a fresh perspective of, you know, with my learning in school, things that are going on in, you know, the US and in the world, and apply them to what we can do locally, and also the reverse of what we're doing locally and how we can see it improve other places in the world as well with regard to waters and grasses and estuaries. I think that's all.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Liz actually came out to one of our give-a-days already, so that's pretty awesome. So thanks, Liz, for coming out and participating in those. And then we also have another member, or another interested member, Cynthia Grizzle. Is Cynthia on?
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Sue, and everybody else.
we can talk about that, yeah, as soon as you finish.
So Cynthia, do you want to give a brief introduction to you, a little bit about your background and why you want to be on the CAC?
Yeah, thanks everybody. I have, although I can't say I'm a true native, I have been in Pinellas County or Hillsborough County since I was 2, so Florida is all I know.
Pretty darn.
I been here, grew up in the area. I went to USF, got an environmental science and policy degree, started working as an environmental consultant, and then I actually got a master's degree in environmental management while I was working, and now I actually have my own company, and we do like community planning, environmental planning, and environmental services. I've been involved in so many different things over the course of my career. I was actually the founding chair of the Suncoast Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. I finally had to step back from that to create a void so somebody else could take the reins. And I am now currently on the board of directors for the Tampa Bay Association of Environmental Professionals. So in my personal life, of course, I'm an environmental scientist. I love being outside. Like, I think I put in my application there that there's so many aspects of my life that have been tied to the environment and the Bay, and it's just part of who I am. Like, I don't even know what else to say, as I'm sure it's similar for the rest of you all. But yeah, I haven't really done a lot in the coastal environment, like in my professional life. So it's like, I miss it and I want to get back to that. And that's just kind of something that I feel like being a part of this team could help. And I can help as well. So that's about me. And I know Sue from way back.
Yeah, can we comment on any of these, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Sheila, can I just say, I guess it was over 20 years ago, they put an ad in the paper for people that were interested in tracking at Brooker Creek Preserve. They wanted to do some inventory of the animals there. So at the first meeting, I think there were probably 30 people, Cynthia, and quickly it got down to Cynthia and I were the only trackers for Brooker Creek. And so we tracked for years and years, sometimes twice a week, and we would just walk miles in the preserve. And I mean, at that point, we talked all about Cynthia's boyfriends, and I talked all about my kids cutting school, and and now she's married and my kids have kids. But that's why we both laugh, because we've exchanged a lot of information. But she's a really hard worker, and obviously, stuck with it. And I think Cynthia, you did some projects for them after that as an internship. But I highly recommend her. So
Yeah. I was an intern in the Pinellas County Land Management Department. After that, they saw how I spent 4 years volunteering for them, and I think they finally caved and felt bad for me and gave me a job. And I thought they
that's
were
great. Great.
I always thought they were the suckers. I'm like, oh, these guys, they pay me $10 an hour to go walk in the woods. That's that's great. I was happy as a clam. So, so it just, and actually it's kind of coming full circle. This week it's not on the Pinellas County side of things, but I'm actually helping with a restoration project in the Brooker Creek Buffer Preserve. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Sheila, do we need to make any kind of a motion to include these people, or is it just automatically?
It's automatically. So welcome to the CAC, both of you.
Both Liz and Cynthia.
Yeah, it's great to have both of you on board. TBEP's one of our goals is to enhance and increase science literacy. So it'll be great to help that y'all will be able to bring your science backgrounds to help us achieve that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So moving on to, we have a Bay Mini Grant Spotlight, as we do so often. So I will turn it over to Stephanie. Are you ready, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to get started. And welcome to the new members. It's really exciting. Let me see if this is going to work as easily as it did earlier.
Hold on, I have to find you in my list. Okay.
I was going to say, it's telling me it's sending you a request. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, just to confirm, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. Alrighty. Well, hello everybody, and obviously for the new people, my name is Stephanie Lawler-Ellington, and I'm the program director for Keep Pinellas Beautiful. Today I'm going to chat a bit about our organization, KPB, and how we're working to empower Bay Area residents of all ages to become environmentally responsible citizens, and the way that TBEP has supported this and the growth of our organization over the years. And I've been lucky enough to work with TBEP for, well, going on 6 years now. So this has been a great partnership, and I'm excited to be able to spend the next 20-ish minutes. You guys got to keep me tight on my time, talking to you about some of our projects. So let's see. All right, so I always like to start off with a little bit about our organization. We are your local Keep America Beautiful affiliate. We opened our doors in 1992 here in Pinellas County, so we've been around for nearly 30 years and have been active and integral piece of our community this entire time. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to conserving and beautifying our natural environment by means of community engagement and education. Now, we accomplish this through 4 focal areas: litter prevention, waste reduction, conservation, and more recently added the beautification and community greening aspect. So our affiliate works with businesses, schools, neighborhood groups, and local governments to tackle tough issues, and there's a whole list of them, but things like illegal dumping, roadway litter, water pollution, specifically marine debris, neglected vacant lots where we're seeing an accumulation of debris, runoff issues, and then obviously the lack of healthy green space. And since we're an urban area, we really need to have healthy ecosystems. We provide lots of practical ways for everyone to get involved, and we work to engage our residents to improve and be a part of our initiatives. So through education, empowerment, engagement, our vision is to create a culture of environmentally responsible citizens. Like, that is our goal. And we can empower and motivate our neighbors to take action and develop that sense of ownership. So all of our programming is tied towards creating that sense of ownership. So I'm going to just highlight a few of our programs and recognize that the majority of these programs have grown to what they are today because of the influence of TBEP. So our education initiatives empower residents and students to become active stewards and advocates for their environment. We provide free presentations throughout the schools. We've recently gone very virtual, obviously with COVID, but we also work with businesses and civic organizations to help cover a variety of environmental topics and provide them the resources and educational pieces to spread the message about environmentalism within the community. Not so recently, we haven't been a part of fairs and outreach, obviously, but that was also a really big part of our educational initiatives. Our student involvement, honestly, is probably one of the most robust that I've worked with, and a lot of that has to do with TBEP's influence. So we now work with students through our youth advisory workshops, our youth advisory council. We've created summer workshop programs tied to engaging them in creating advocacy and leadership within our high school teens. We have our Kids Can initiatives, which in some experiences in the past have been tied to some give-a-days that are aimed towards younger students and emphasizing that they can make a difference. So that's a really wonderful program. And again, all of it is just empowering youth because they're the next generation that's going to be taking on this advocacy. Our Adopt a Mile program is really big in that it is like the grassroots effort for people to be able to get involved and take ownership in their space. So we provide the supplies, the resources, the materials, ways for them to engage their local community, neighbors, friends, groups, and go out and maintain an area, which is a really awesome program. Our hotline is probably the easiest way for people to get involved. And if you don't have this number saved, please write it down right now. This is a way that you can report illegal dumpings, illegal litter, or excessive litter in the community. And we offer this as a free service. So you make a call, you report it, we come out, we assess, and we manage it or work with the cities to deal with the issue. You probably know of our annual cleanups, the Great American Cleanup and the International Coastal Cleanup. These are our big seasons each year. So in the spring and the fall, we focus on hosting cleanups and projects all over the county. This is a great way for people to get their groups involved, and TBEP has been a part of that with Give-A-Days for the last 5 years. And then the community improvement initiatives that are tied towards beautification. This is a great program. We get out, we help to restore different green spaces, parks, and we're getting people involved and creating beautiful places. So why am I here today? The biggest thing that I wanted to do with this presentation was to highlight the influence that the Tampa Bay Estuary Program has had within our organization's growth over the last 5 years. I've been applying for the mini grants for 5-6 years, and every year I'm able to expand our programming and work to enhance our education, and it's all because of TBEP. So I'm going to walk you guys through the different topics that we've covered over the last 5 years, the results and the successes, and then kind of get you up to date with where we're at today. So in 2016, I came on board with KeyPB, and we were in the middle of our Educating We All Live Downstreams program. This was a pretty cool grant that was designed to further expand our educational programs, specifically in these We All Live Downstreams regions. Now I'm going to talk a bit about what those are, but we're focusing in certain areas that have a really large impact on the watershed, but have some issues going on within the communities that we wanted to highlight and focus our education and our engagement initiatives. So in 2015, the Board of County Commissioners came out and said there are certain areas within Pinellas County have a lot of high crime, high urbanization, tying that in with blight, issues with litter, and that being one of our 4 focal areas was an area that we could help with and assess. So with the deliverables of this grant, introducing more education, getting out into the community, creating paired education and engagement projects, and then hosting a series of cleanups, we were really wanting to focus on this area. Now, our organization does cleanups all throughout the county, so we are available everywhere, but we've never centrally focused on specific watersheds to see the progress, to see how much of an effort we can have. And we've never had the funds to be able to do that. So that was the benefit of this grant. So I'm going to highlight some of the really cool projects that happened in this grant period and then talk to you about what the results were. Our High Point area was one of the key issues, specifically because it's a food desert area. Now, this wasn't focused on trash. In this instance, we were really trying to create that care and ownership for this family center. And we engaged communities and residents around the family center and in the surrounding area to bring in food producing vegetation, to really clean up this space. We did mulching, we did planting, we did a community cleanup, but I've never seen more passionate of a group. And this was one of the first cleanups that I got involved with, so it was a really cool experience for me. TBEP was able to sponsor our first leadership workshop in partnership with USF. So we worked with 25 high schools for the first USF and TBEP/KPB partnership to work on leadership skills with these students. So over a 5-day period, kids got involved with understanding the true environmental issues of the area. We brought in workshops on photography, creating PSAs, creating projects specific to those environmental issues. And by the end of it, we were helping them come up with ways to identify resources and ways to solve these issues. It was such a cool project that we further on with that and now have had several years worth of funding from Tampa Bay Water to continue the effort and expand. Obviously with COVID, it looks a little different this year, but it has been a really cool staple program that we've been able to offer to the students in the community. And it's completely free, which is very different from other workshops and camps. Let's see. Some other really cool projects working within the Lealman area. If you're familiar with Lealman, it is a pretty struggling community, but it has such amazing partners in it. The Police Athletic League is one of the tried and true in that community, and they have a great resource for students looking to get out of trouble and just have a safe place. And so we spend a lot of time working with them, doing community cleanups, working at Rainieri Park, as well as beautifying their space, which is a benefit. And then my alma mater, which I bring here, USF College of Marine Science. We live in such a science hub that I'm always looking for ways to engage the scientists and the students that are working within our community. So this was a really fun project. So what are the results? 2016 and 2017, we saw progress within our presentations, expanding to 34 presentations in the first year and then 51 presentations in the second. You'll also see an increase in volunteers engaged within our programming and community projects. One thing I do want you guys to note is during that time, we were able to remove over and right around 500,000 pounds of trash. Now, that's specifically within these 6 communities. Again, I tell you, we work all over the county, so there was additional trash pulled from other cleanups all over the area. And then you'll also note, in 2017, we really started to expand our efforts within planting because, again, we were noticing, in addition to trash, that lack of ownership, it was way beyond trash. It was beautifying the space. So we also came in with some fun plants to help clean up the space and really engage the community in immediate change. Moving on to 2018, 2019, we had so much fun working with plants that we were like, okay, what's the next thing that we can do? And what's a program that we don't have within our current programming? We've always been known for trash. It's kind of funny, actually, that all of us have gone to school for something very specific, and now we're known for picking up trash. But we wanted to design this grant to educate the community on the health of ecosystems, to identify native species, and to point out the impacts of invasive species, as well as restoring local ecosystems and emphasizing right plant, right place. So for the 2 years that we received these grants, we developed curriculum tied to native species, invasives, and the impact on ecosystems, expanded educational presentations within schools, keeping in mind prior to this grant, we didn't cover this topic in our school presentations. So it allowed us to go in with something completely different. And then we introduced quarterly service projects specifically with students, as well as hosted monthly invasive species projects and plantings. It also really allowed us to expand our partnerships, and I'll be able to point out some of those partners in the next few slides. So I love working with schools. We've had so many different experiences, and while we come into the school with a plan, it never really goes that way. Every school is different. So Eisenhower Elementary had a wonderful idea of comparing planting types, gardening styles, different types of habitats. So we came in with commensal plants, host plants, pollinator plants, also looking at some edibles, just ways to get the students engaged with gardening that they had never had the opportunity to do that. And they used both beds and natural landscaping. So they had the opportunity to explore what that looked like on their campus. Working with Tyrone Middle was an entirely different beast. They had the opportunity for us to test different styles of gardening, from things that you would see naturally in landscape to having different types of beds, from raised beds, vertical beds, pyramid beds, and the kids got to design it completely on their own. So we worked with classrooms for the kids to figure out what types of plants would work in certain spaces, how often they need to be maintained, how they wanted it laid out, and the kids designed it. And we came in and helped them implement it. And so that was a multi-year process, but that initiated with the TBEP grant. And then with MK Rawlings, honestly, these kids just wanted to get their hands dirty. So we had the opportunity with a fun space to bring in color, bring in native plants, allow them to really make it their own. Most of the positioning of plants was designed by the kids, but you know, some things work better than others. We had the opportunity to go back and do some trial and error and just let them explore the space. So less formal, but more fun. In addition to student work, obviously, we were with some of our wonderful partners, working with Brooker Creek Preserve on their service days, working in the Pinellas Trail with the county on removing everything from Brazilian pepper to different types of vine vegetation. And then our wonderful partners, Crescent Lake, who we've been with for the last 6 years, and man, do they put us to work. From everything to inserting islands to getting out there in the muck and removing thousands and thousands of pounds of water lettuce. We've been with this group the whole time, and I've never had more fun. And then the last, which I'll highlight, which is one of the newer experiences for us, is right before COVID, we had the opportunity to work with this private lake that's part of the Adopt a Pond program with Pinellas County. While parts of it are county property, most of it was residential, and it was completely covered in water hyacinth and water lettuce, and I mean, to the point where you didn't even realize it was a lake. And so we came in and started partnering with the neighbors and helping them get the resources to be able to address this issue with dumpsters and our boats, also provided by in the 2016 TDEP grant, that really allowed them to first realize they have a lake and be able to take it back. So that was a really cool program, and I'm almost afraid to see what it looks like now because of COVID, but we are excited to get back out there. So the results of this programming, it's pretty similar across the years. We just kind of shifted our focus, right? So close to 100 programs, educational presentations we were introducing trees, we were introducing a lot of native vegetation, planting gardens all throughout the county, working with different areas to introduce mulch or rock and shell paths to create this experiential program with different gardens, working with a wonderful set of volunteers and increasing our invasive species removal. So you can see within the 2 years, we went from almost 150,000 pounds of invasive vegetation removed to over 200,000 pounds. And so as the program shifted and the educational presentations got into the schools, we really started to see how we could define this program. And it's still going today. Our education is just as strong, and we're looking to expand our planting efforts.
Hi. Okay.
Someone's saying hi. So that brings us to 2020, which is an interesting year, as we know. But the last 2 years, so 2020 and 2021, have focused on microplastics and bringing education to citizen science to Pinellas County. So the grant purpose for the 2020 year was to educate the local community about the presence of microplastics and the dangers of microplastics, but also reinforcing where these plastics are coming from, their sources of single-use plastics. We engaged public on the studying of the abundance, so we were really trying to bring in more people to help us collect samples. We set up a lab at our site. This was going to be a wonderful opportunity to get people's hands dirty in the water, collecting and then having them analyze samples. And then we were pairing all of this with our cleanups, right? So we do over 1,000 projects a year. We were looking to take parts of those, do sampling. Every cleanup now has an informational section on microplastics and the types of trash we're finding at them. We were on track. The hopes for this program were to expand our implementation, creating new signage, trifold posters for outreach, handouts that went to all of our cleanups. We created a plastic-free pledge and stickers, so we could give you stickers if you pledge to reduce your single-use plastic use. And then from there, we also had the opportunity to expand and start our first ever blogs. And most of them for the last year focused on single-use plastics, the presence of microplastics, and ways that people could get involved in our programming. We did create a video, which I'm going to show. It's like 2 minutes, but it basically highlights what are microplastics and the processes that people could do to get involved in our office work. So hopefully this sound goes through. Please let me know if you don't hear it. Can you hear that? No, you can't. Okay. So, Sheila, do you know how I can share sound? And if I can't, that's okay. I can always.
I don't. Maya or anybody else on TBEP staff know how you can share sound?
And if it doesn't go through, oh, go ahead.
Is the sound just coming through like your computer speakers?
Yeah.
I think worst case scenario, if you just turn the volume up quite a bit and have your microphone pick it up.
Okay, and if it doesn't go through, guys, that's okay. I can always send these to people and send it to Sheila to share. I have another video too from one of our recent projects with TBEP. Okay, let's see. We'll give it a try.
Cool.
And just shake your head if you don't hear it. No.
No.
All right, so we're just gonna move on, and that's totally fine. Sheila, I'll share that with you. It's a great little 1-minute video on what we're doing in our office and the work that our volunteers are doing to help us collect samples and process samples. It's pretty cool. And it was created right in the middle of COVID, so it was a great way for us to expand our programming when we couldn't interact with people. So the last bit of it really is the assessment process, right? So we worked with over 104 sample sites last year. And each of those was collected, filtered, analyzed in our office, and then reported to FMAP. So that expanded our understanding of plastics out there in Pinellas County and the abundance. So looking at, I gotta make sure it'll let me shift it over. Looking at the challenges, I feel like I don't have to tell you the challenges of last year, but really, truly, obviously COVID restricted social distancing. So our beach cleanups were canceled. The outreach events were canceled. In-person education, everything was canceled, including our volunteer recruitment. But we were able to overcome the challenges, right? So we recruited ambassadors towards the end of last year that could come in and help us process. Prior to the ambassadors working with us, our team was out collecting samples individually and sampling and processing them in the office by ourselves. So it was great to have some volunteers come in. We did create a second lab station in our office so we could have volunteers separate and allow them the opportunity to gain experience with the protocols and the samples. We also were forced to transition to online blogs, videos, social media, and turning our entire workshop program into online, which really allowed us to explore what that meant and how far our reach really could go. So that was it was a great outcome. So looking at the results of last year, nothing like the previous years, right? 16 education and outreach events. The variety of those took place online. Posting over 56 social media posts tied to single-use plastics or microplastics, working with around 104 microplastic samples. I actually think the number is 111, but these got processed and sampled and submitted last year. And then honestly bringing on 35 ambassadors towards the end of the year and growing. We're actually with a waiting list now since we still can't have as many people in the office as we would like. And then moving forward, we still have people working on our pledge, which is great. So people are taking the commitment to reduce plastics. So that brings us to 2021. And I'm just going to give you guys a brief glance at what we've done for the first quarter. So we were looking to expand last year's grant. So continuing our sampling, but really focusing on how to connect with people since COVID was still ever present when we wrote the grant, still is. And we were concerned about how to engage and educate and provide resources to teachers to expand the mission and the information out there on single-use plastics. So working with schools and outreach, creating microplastics learning kits, these comprehensive kits that would compile resources from all different organizations as well as ourselves and basically give teachers everything they need to execute these activities. And then we also were working with 2 high schools to set up different labs in their sites so that they can process samples on their own and really engage students beyond just them coming to our office, which restricts their hours. So far, we've put together a variety of interactive activities for students, social media posts, trivia, online, and there will be one in person towards the end of the year. We are continuing with our plastic-free pledge. We've had 58 cleanups as of March this year, so we are back at it and engaging people, and everyone learns about single-use plastics, what types of trash they're picking up, and microplastics at their events. And then our curriculum, we are in the process of finalizing our curriculum. And I'm talking, this is going to be a comprehensive curriculum. We actually present it for the first time tomorrow at a teacher's workshop with IFAS. So we're really excited to potentially have some of those teachers test pilot it in the fall. And then, as I mentioned, we've got 2 high school schools coming on board and the supplies have been ordered and will be set up in August. So we're excited to get those kids on board. We're also going to be working with some of our high school interns this summer as we are still collecting samples, and they will be working to adapt some new protocols into our process we're working with NOAA and TBEP's admin on different ways that we can adapt, like Nile Red and different protocols that other partners are using. So bringing that validity to the FMAP sampling that we're doing. So some results so far for the first quarter: 5 outreach events, over 20 social media posts, over 100 microplastic samples collected, and we are now working with 23 active ambassadors. And we just got done doing some pretty cool education in the office now that some restrictions have lifted, so we're excited to engage students and the community. So one of the things that I want to also highlight, in addition to the grants, the partnership with the Give-A-Days, I'm just going to walk through some of these different events. If you've had the opportunity to join us, you know that this is a wonderful partnership that's gone back to 2017, working with Blackthorn, Brooker Creek Reserve, Clam Bayou, all incredibly high need areas. Bartlett Park, Kennett City, 4th Street 275, Gandy Beach, and most recently the Bartlett Park, planting initiative and cleanup, which was a lot of fun. So I guess when I reflect on all the work that we've done and the partnerships that I've had in the last 6 years, we started as a really great organization, right? But looking back, I guess I didn't realize the true influence that the Tampa Bay Estuary Program had on our growth. Going from just doing cleanups with no real direction to focusing on areas of high need and exploring what that looks like and how we can engage. We've even adapted our community appearance index to focus on the walled areas, that we all live downstreams areas, because of the work we did with TBEP. The entire beautification program we have was designed with the assistance of Tampa Bay Estuary Fund mini grants. And the Microplastics program, having the opportunity to engage our community on true citizen science, would have never been an opportunity without the mini bay grants. So when I'm talking to community members about who our funders are, when I talk to them about who really helped define us, you never want to not go for the opportunity, because look how far we've grown. So thank you to TBEP and to all of the support and sponsors. And my screen just shut off, so sorry, you guys lost my last slide. But we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. So thank you for letting me highlight all the work we've done in the last 6 years with you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. What's really amazing is every year Stephanie and the Keep Pinellas Beautiful provide like a spreadsheet that outlines all of the volunteers that they interacted with, the number of educational curricula, or the educational classrooms that they've participated in, and their final numbers just from one single year is mind-blowing. So it's really great to have Keep Pinellas Beautiful as a partner, and I look forward to future partnerships.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of funny having the task of looking back at all of our grants from where we started and where I started with the organization. Just to see that growth was like, this is great. I have to share this with everybody. So thank you guys so much. And thanks for sitting in and letting me, boast on how wonderful our partnership has been.
So are there any questions, comments, conversations for Stephanie?
I'd like to know about the maps you presented, the collection points for the microplastics. Could I see that, and exactly where they are? Who takes care of them? Do you have staff doing that, or is it volunteers?
Yeah, so the way that we designed that, and I have one of our staff members who runs the Microplastics program. He actually started as an intern funded by TBEP and completely designed this plan. So he has gone through and strategically selected freshwater, brackish, and saltwater sites all across Pinellas County, primarily focusing on areas that we've done cleanups so that we could tie it to education that we do, areas that we focus for different efforts. There are additional new ones because we also wanted to learn of areas in need that we don't know about. So we spent some time exploring different water bodies, and he combed Pinellas County's map looking for water, which is pretty entertaining. Some of the sites are repeated just because of how frequently we go out to those locations. And he was trying to track it seasonally, but obviously there's so many variables involved. It doesn't give us much information to go by other than just to continue to add to the database of samples that were collected. And then given that we had so many ambassadors involved, we've had to cut back. I mean, last year we completed 104 samples in 1 year, and this year alone in the first quarter we've hit 104. And so I told him, like, it's a lot of sampling. So I'm happy to share those maps. I know he's got GPS points and stuff for all of those and how he created that. But really the rhyme and reason was finding where we've done projects, safely being able to have volunteers select sampling, which they're still doing, and then keeping track of it all. So he has a whole system behind it.
Okay,
I hope, does that help?
yes.
Okay, good. And I did mention the Community Appearance Index. So the WALD's 2-year grants were pretty cool in that they highlighted these areas, and we focused on watersheds so that we could hone in on education, hone in on hosting cleanups within the watershed that the high area was indicated to be in. And from there, Keep America Beautiful has a Community Appearance Index where you visually drive down a set of roads that are mapped out and assess what the streets look like each year, like at a certain time of year. And so because of the work that we did with the TBEP grant, we identified that these would be great years to follow, just continue to follow a consecutive set of years in these sites. And so that has been the process for the last 5 years of keeping those set walled areas as our focus. This will be the last year that we do that. And we've seen some transition, right? When we had a lot of education and a lot of engagement, some areas were cutting down. But then 1 year we might have mixed it up and gone in a rainy season and there was no trash. And we're like, well, where'd the trash go? It was raining. But it's been interesting to see how we've engaged the community members and how that's reflective in the status of debris in their area. So again, the grants, are really cool in that year, but they bring on other questions that have expanded our programming over the years. So I could really talk forever, guys.
Any other questions for Stephanie?
Okay, thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. So moving on, you guys have expressed interest in the past about seeing some of the TAC presentations, which are our technical advisory community or committee presentations. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to bring one of the newest presentations. It was actually done today, so some of you who are here probably have already seen a similar presentation. We are going to move on to the 2020 Seagrass results, which is Gary Rollerson.
Thanks, Sheila. Can you make me presenter, please?
Sure. Sorry, I didn't know I had to make you a presenter.
Everybody see my first slide?
Yes.
Okay. So this is an encapsulated presentation from what myself and Chris Anastasiou with the Water Management District, SwiftMud, did this morning. And I'll start out by saying, don't shoot the messenger. This isn't good information. This isn't good news that we're sharing today, but it's good information. And this is one of the drums that I've been beating recently. And we've been, this is one of the essential pieces of the estuary program, is that we wouldn't understand the problems that are within this data unless we had a long-term data set. The Water Management District has been monitoring seagrasses in Tampa Bay on a every other year biannual basis since 1988. And we use that information as baseline to try to understand what's improving, what's declining in the system. And we have multiple long-term data sets, and it's fairly unparalleled worldwide. We have this Seagrass aerial data set. We have Seagrass transects data that's dating back 25 years. We have water quality data that dates back to 1971. We have benthic information that also dates back about 25 years. So we have a very robust set of information that helps us understand and identify issues that are happening in the system and helps us lay the foundation for research that we need to do to advise the management activities that we can implement throughout the system. And I'm going to go through some of that today. But just as a quick refresher, why do we care about seagrasses? And again, it is foundational to the estuary program. We have hung our hat on the value of seagrasses, the importance of water quality within this system for several decades. It's a cornerstone habitat within Tampa Bay. It has high economic value because of the recreational components and the fisheries that are out there, the potential for shellfish in different systems. It's also a very straightforward indicator for a lot of different people. We can, say whether or not the seagrasses are increasing or decreasing, and that resonates with people, with fishermen, with the general public. We have what's called the seagrass management paradigm, basically saying that if the water, say back in the 1970s, was very green and there were low seagrasses, because remember that seagrasses are a plant, so you reduce the nutrients that are in the water, the chlorophyll that's in the water gets reduced, the water becomes less green, the plants growing on the bottom, that is the seagrasses, start to grow better, and so we see increased seagrasses. So it's a very straightforward cycle. And so we can establish numeric goals, targets that are well versed in science. We've got, like I said, these long-term monitoring programs that are going on that provide fundamental baseline information. And then we can use the data that we have and the information that we continue to gain to conduct different management activities and start to tweak those as time goes by, as we understand different issues in different locations. So the data I'm going to be talking about today is in quotes 2020, because it was actually collected anywhere between November of 2019 and I think February of 2020. The district flies in basically four months, and there's significant water quality and weather parameters that they have to meet. Has to be low tide. It has to be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So there's less reflectivity on the sunlight. There can't be wind. There can't be waves, and so it can take quite a while for them to fly. And then all of this, these photographs are digitized, and they're not just doing for Tampa Bay. They're also going down to Sarasota Bay and Charlotte Harbor every 2 years, like they do for us, and then up to the Springs Coast every 4 years. And this was a 4-year. This was one of the 4-year efforts. So they're gathering a ton of photography, and then they take this back to the office, to the computers, and start to digitize everything and identify where the seagrasses lie and where there's blank space, and also very important to consider for this time around where they think what is called where attached macroalgae, and the one we'll be focusing on is called caulerpa, where these show up within the system. And then they actually do a significant amount of field verification while the planes are flying and over the next several months to try to make sure that what they are identifying on these maps is indeed seagrass or bare sand or caulerpa or oysters, because they actually also do oysters during this process as well. So it takes them from basically February of 2020 till now to get this data out. It was released provisionally a couple of months ago. We have the final data in-house right now, and that's what I'm talking about. And please stop me with any questions anywhere through this.
Gary, can you explain what macroalgae is? For those of what caulerpa is, for those who might not know?
In what sense?
Well, I guess I can just kind of give some background. So similar to what Gary was saying, in that when nutrients from fertilizers and such get into the water column, it can feed microalgae or phytoplankton, which is what makes the water look really green. And then that shades the light from or shades the seagrasses, so, and can hurt the seagrasses. But there's also other species that can take up those nutrients. Some species like macroalgae, which are basically larger algae that we can see with a naked eye. So those of you might have seen like Lingbia, that's one sort of macroalgae type organism. And so some of these macroalgae are floating, so they kind of just move around with winds and currents, but then there's also some that are rooted, which is what Gary is talking about, and that's Caulerpa. And so they don't technically have real root structures like a normal plant does, but they have what we call holdfast. So it just they're basically like little attachments that hold them to the sediment. But unlike plants, which obtain their nutrients from the sediment, these algae obtain the nutrients from the water column. So just for those of you who didn't know what macroalgae were. Sorry, Gary.
No worries. Thank you, Sheila. So as I mentioned, we're not looking at good news right now. 2014, 2016, and 2018, we had actually seen the three highest reported amounts of seagrass in Tampa Bay since basically 1950 that we had been reported. We had 2016 was the highest, about 41,000 acres. We lost about 1,000 acres from 2016 to 2018. But then we went down from that 40,000 plus acreage to around 34,000 acres over this last time frame. A lot of that was actually lost in Old Tampa Bay, that area called the Hump, right around Feather Sound. We saw a lot of transition from seagrasses to this macroalgae right here, Caulerpa, that we've been talking about. I'm going to spend the next couple of slides trying to explain some of the things that we are going to be investigating over the next several years with our partners through the Technical Advisory Committee to try to understand why we've seen these losses. Of course, so again, the big question is why the loss, and this is that Feather Sound area, 2018. The greens are where there were seagrasses at that point, and then from the interpretation of the 2020 aerials. This blue tealish is where the Water Management District identified Caulerpa, and then again the greens are where there were seagrasses. And so you see this huge transition from seagrasses to Caulerpa in this system. And so we need to find out why we observed these losses or this transition. And one of the first things we need to do is go and dig into the data and identify some different hotspots. This is probably the most obvious of the locations that saw this big transition. But what are the other locations throughout the bay that either saw this transition from Caulerpa to from seagrass to Caulerpa, or simply lost seagrasses? And one of those spots, another spot of concern, is the entire system of Hillsborough Bay. Over the last 4 years, that is from 2016 to 2020, it's lost about 60% of its seagrasses. It's not a whole, on the acreage scale, that equates to about 1,000 acres, so it's not as nearly as much in the scheme of things as the about 4,000 acres that we've lost in Old Tampa Bay. But for that particular system, it is a considerable amount. It's a big chunk of what was, it's an enormous chunk of what was there, and so we need to try to understand what these potentially different causes and or effects are in these different systems. And I'll also let you know that we're not alone in this. The Sarasota Bay and Charlotte Harbor also saw significant seagrass losses over this 2018 to 2020 timeframe. And so we'll be working with our partners there, as well as the folks over in the Indian River Lagoon who've seen major downturns in seagrasses over the past decade, to try to understand how these different systems maybe responding to different drivers, to different stressors.
Gary, I
also
have
like-
a question.
Jan, go ahead.
It must be, how did the Water Management District flying over this aerially to do this assessment, how can they tell Caulerpa from Seagrass? They must look very similar.
It is, it's at this point, it's truly an art. There,
Yeah.
and this is one of the things we we worry about consistently with turnover for the professionals, that the contractors that they have that are doing this work. They are fairly spot on identifying these differences. There's apparently different grains, granular looks to the photos. There's different minor coloration differences that help them identify it. And when they go out to do the ground truthing, they get it right.
Jan, on the maps, Caulerpa maps as a much darker color. So like Gary was saying, you can see as Caulerpa started to take over in that Feather Sound area, you would get these like very much more black kind of color signatures. And
Right.
and they don't accept the maps until they get a more than 90% accuracy through field verification. So there's confidence that they're capturing a change that's true.
Okay.
Gary, I had a question. What about any correlation with temperatures? I mean, have the temperatures been rising in the bay for the past several years?
We haven't done any analysis like that, but it's definitely one of the questions I have. And so yeah, with climate change that we're seeing, whether or not some of these seagrasses may be getting either baked when they're exposed, when there's very low tides, some of our shallow seagrasses get exposed. If Caulerpa, can respond differentially, survive better in those systems, or as the water temperatures change. We are going to be. We had a significant conversation this morning with the TAC about different potential conditions for competition. Whether or not there's whether there is nutrient cycling differences, because again, we're looking at plants versus algae. So they're and as Sheila mentioned, the macroalgae is taking water up through the nutrients through the column. The plants are taking it up generally through the sediment. So there's different cycling of the nutrients that they may be involved with that give at one point or another Caulerpa or seagrasses a competitive advantage. And so we're going to try to we're going to work on understanding those and see, towards that end of trying to understand what management activities are needed. One thing we also discussed that Maya brought forward this morning was some of the timing. We're looking on our we have annual seagrass transects that are done in the fall. We're going to do training in a week on that, and then our partners will be monitoring about 60 locations around the bay. But and then the Water Management District flies the seagrasses for their aerial analysis in the wintertime, because that's the best water quality. But there may be there are very likely some timing issues that we're missing as these transitions occur on a seasonal basis. So one of the potential options is to go out and look on a quarterly basis at these, or every couple of months, to try to identify how they're changing. And then the final thing that we talked about was yes.
Let me speak.
I muted them.
Okay, thank you. The final thing that we're interested in, one of the final things we're interested in, is the potential habitat values. We don't know to a very certain extent the habitat value of Caulerpa. We've got there's some literature out there that indicates that it may, for instance, may not be as good a food source for manatees or sea turtles. It's not as nutritious. But what are the fisheries values for this? What are the sediment holding capacities? One of the things we purport for seagrasses is its value to prevent erosion, basically like a good fertile lawn or landscape covering in your yard, there's less erosion if there's a lot of roots in there holding us. And so it might be that the Clerpa isn't as good as holding it, but we don't know that for certain. And the other thing that we've been talking about a long time within the estuary program and working with the U.S. Geological Survey is the way that seagrasses actually have acidification buffering capacity. As we've increased our seagrasses over the past several decades, we've also seen an increase in pH. And as you're probably aware, there's some concerns worldwide about ocean acidification, and our seagrass regeneration has potentially mitigated that in the bay. And if we're losing seagrasses, we need to keep an eye on that as well. And a couple other questions that we're thinking about, and again, working with multiple partners on this. The mantra of the estuary program is we do not work in a vacuum. We have partners on everything we do. One of the big questions for Old Tampa Bay is a dinoflagellate, pyridinium. It's a harmful algal bloom that shows up there and has shown up there pretty much every year since 2000, and we think it is occluding the water. And so we're looking at different management activities, doing restoration of shellfish, mostly oysters and possibly clams in Old Tampa Bay that may be able to consume the pyridinium. And
Gary,
so
can I interject really quickly? So at the beginning of the meeting, some of you were talking about bioluminescence in Old Tampa Bay and seeing the red tide come in. Typically what you're seeing in Old Tampa Bay, the discolored water and that bioluminescing is probably pyridinium. That's a species that does bioluminesce. And so it sounds like many of you are familiar with it. And we do think it's potentially contributing to poorer light conditions that are not as supportive for seagrass growth in Old Tampa Bay. So that's what he's talking about when he talks about pyridinium.
Thanks, Maya. So we're looking to see what the water quality conditions that are setting up pyridinium, and one of the ways we may be able to mitigate is increase the shellfish that are in the system that may be able to consume pyridinium before it starts to bloom. The next thing is, so for those of you who have been around a while, most of our increases in water quality through the mid 2010s was most of our increases in seagrasses were due to improvements in water quality. Something I've heard quotes of better than 99% of the seagrass regeneration that we have is due to water quality improvements. Less than 1% is due to planting of seagrasses or putting in plugs or something along those lines. However, in a condition like this, where we have seen a significant loss, there may be areas where we can, jumpstart the regeneration of the seagrasses through specific targeted planting. And one of the things that I was talking about in the earlier meeting was a dredged hole assessment project that we did about 2 years ago, and it was piggybacked on one from 2005, and we identified between those two planning processes about half a dozen holes, dredged holes, and these are where basically bay bottom was dug up to create finger fill canals, or the Howard Franklin Bridge or the Courtney Campbell back in the 50s and the 60s. And basically, if we can fill some of those holes in, the ones that we've identified as appropriate, we can fill those up to where the current bay bottom grade that's there, it may be able to help us get seagrasses back in those locations. But it would be a potential help to actually jumpstart that process by adding some plugs within those systems. And again, this is based on understanding of the water quality in those systems and the circulation factors. Something that was mentioned a little while ago was temperature. Whether we may be entering into a rainier system again, and so we need to go back to our bread and butter conditions for and our understanding of water quality improving the seagrasses in the system. We know that there are still some significant issues for instance, in Old Tampa Bay, where we can improve stormwater, we can improve some other water quality delivery systems that may be able to help us if we we do see increased rainfall over the next several years. And also going back to the temperature discussion, if there are different temperature survival rates for our species, or something that makes the Callirpa, for instance, be able to outcompete our seagrass species in these different systems, in these different conditions, we need to look at that as well. And then just sort of wrap up with, again, thinking about the importance of water quality, these long-term monitoring programs that we have going on with this, the aerial analysis that the district does, and the seagrass transects that we help lead the long-term water quality, are important pieces of information that help us answer the questions going forward. We're going to be able to use the information that we've had to guide the future research. And I will stop there and take any more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
I have a question about the Callirpa. Because the Callirpa grows differently, it's not rooted in the bottom. Is it still photosynthetic or not?
Yes, it is photosynthetic.
It is. So does it use nutrients in the same way that seagrass uses nutrients, or does it use different nutrients, or use them in a different way, or do we know?
It uses
Oh, go ahead. Go for it, Sheila.
Go ahead, Gary. It's your presentation.
Your sideline specialty. So we know that the seagrasses generally take up nutrients through the root systems, whereas the macroalgae like Callirpa are much more efficient at taking them up within the water column.
But are they the same nutrients? Or are they using something different that the seagrass isn't using, so that they're able to succeed better than they have in the past? Because the nitrogen, all the estuary programs partners have done a really good job in managing nitrogen, other than the recent Piney Point debacle. But, progress has been continually made about reducing the nitrogen going into the bay. So even though worldwide there's a lot more macroalgae because of increasing nitrogen pollution, it seems like we've done a good job controlling it here. So I'm wondering why there is more Callirpa than there used to be. But I guess that's one of the questions that needs to be answered.
Sheila might have some insight, or Ed.
Sure, are you gonna go? You could go. Hey, Jan. No, good question. And then nitrogen and phosphorus are the primary drivers that control algal production in our estuary. In the majority of Tampa Bay, most of the time, nitrogen is the limiting nutrient. So the availability and supply of nitrogen usually supports any sort of plant growth, whether it be algal biomass, seagrass, or macroalgae. And depending on the species, they have different light requirements on how they could use those nutrients. And oftentimes, like Callirpa and macroalgae will potentially outcompete for nutrients because they're faster growing and they don't need as much light to produce biomass. And that's why
that makes sense.
They will capture and proliferate a whole lot quicker than rooted macrophytes like seagrass.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And correct me if I misstated anything, either Sheila or Gary.
No, you're good. I think that, yeah, we have come a long way in reducing nitrogen in the bay and reducing nutrients, but I still think that there's work that needs to be done. And I think that one of the reasons that I wanted to bring these seagrass results to you guys, it's our 30th anniversary this year. So with seagrasses once again declining, and actually below our target acreage, it really reminds us that we need to recommit to improving water quality. And so as you all, as a part of our CAC, you sort of help spread the word of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And so remind your neighbors and your friends to help reduce nutrients and nitrogen into the bay. So don't fertilize during the summer, during the rainy season. Plant native plants that don't need water and nutrients or fertilizer to grow. So those sort of things, we need you guys to help us in spreading that word. Are there any other questions for Gary?
I just have a quick question. I'm sorry if there's background noise. But I'm just wondering what's the minimum mapping unit that is being achieved with these SwiftMed flights at this point?
It's a 1/4 acre is required, but I think they go a lot finer than that on fairly often.
Right, thank you. Just curious.
Great, thank you all. And thanks, Gary, so much for presenting that information.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So moving along, we are going to talk about Bay mini grants. So those of you who are new to the CAC, Bay mini grants, which is the grant program that Stephanie presented on earlier. These are competitive cash awards up to $5,000 that are offered to community organizations for projects that help protect and restore Tampa Bay. These projects are entirely funded by the tarpon tag, which is the green specialty license plate that you probably see a lot of fishermen driving around with. So if you buy a tarpon tag, all of that money goes directly to this program. So typically these projects are restoration or education based. We've also had citizen science projects, like you saw Stephanie present on. We've had some restoration projects, like all of the work done at Crescent Lake. We've even had some research projects that were funded through the Bay Mini Grant Program. So the University of Tampa is looking at estrogen content in pipefish. So hopefully getting some of that information at the end of the year this year. And then education, like the microplastic curriculum that Stephanie presented on. So it's kind of hard for me to believe, but 2021, 2022 Bay Mini Grant call for proposals and call for projects is upon us already. The grant application season will start on July 13th, so like 2-3 weeks away. To help us achieve some of our priorities with the program and help to start hacking away at our CCMP, which is basically our guiding plan for the program, we highlight specific topics to focus on for these Bay Mini Grants. So you can still, any organization can submit an application for as long as it helps to improve Tampa Bay, but we want to specifically focus on certain areas. So this year we are hoping to target the expansion of green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is like pervious surfaces instead of impervious surfaces like concrete. Rain gardens and rain swales, as well as buffer zones around shorelines and ponds and waterways. So the projects we're really hoping to get are focusing on enhancing education and outreach of these rain gardens and other green infrastructure, or expanding on current restoration projects that are already taking place around the watershed. Or the installation of rain gardens that will act as demonstration sites that'll have educational signs in both English and Spanish. So wanted to present you guys with that information. Are there any comments on the topic for this year? Cool. Okay, so with that, since we are opening the application season, I'm also asking for CAC members to volunteer to be on the Bay Mini Grant Review Committee. It's a subcommittee. It's an opportunity for new members to become more familiar with the Bay Mini Grant Program and some of the objectives of the estuary program. But it also helps you to get to know some of your fellow CAC members. Hopefully this year we'll get to meet in person instead of virtually for 6 hours. So if you're interested in being involved in this subcommittee, I'm hoping to have about 6 people or so. So if I don't get volunteers, I'm going to start hounding you guys. So please volunteer. Great. And then one final topic on the Bay Mini Grant program. I also wanted to just let you all know that I have updated the evaluation form. Before it was pretty vague. It was more like in paragraph form in the application. So I wanted to take that paragraph and break it down into specific bullets with different points associated with it. And so my goal with this is the applicants will be able to use this essentially as a rubric to help see what the important components are that they need to have in their application and their project plan, but also for the review committee to help, again, use this as a rubric and basically go down and decide what's in the project, what isn't. So I'm hoping that it'll reduce some of the time that's needed to review the different projects, because last year we had about 38 projects, and I'm hoping to get more than that this year. So I wanted to make it as easy as possible for both the applicants as well as the review committee. So any comments on evaluation form? I can send this out to you guys so that you have an opportunity to review it before it actually goes live on the application.
You have a volunteer in the chat too, Sheila.
I saw that. Thanks, Liz.
Should we volunteer now or through email, or how do you want us to step forward?
If you want to volunteer now, that would be awesome.
I volunteer, unless there's no space, because I do this a lot. And
I'm happy to be a part of it, but if there's new interest, like, just let us know.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll definitely volunteer.
Don't feel bad, anyone, if you give me the boot. It's really okay.
Cool. Thank you all. I appreciate it. It's really not that bad, the reviewing, I promise. So moving on, I wanted to touch on the Golden Mangrove Award Committee. So in light of the pandemic, for those of you who are new, Golden Mangroves are awards that are provided to the most outstanding Bay Mini Grant from the previous year. So any project that was completed is considered in the running for a Bay Mini, or for this Golden Mangrove. And the Golden Mangrove Award is given and chosen by another subcommittee. So because of the pandemic, the 2018-2019 Golden Mangrove Award winners were never chosen. So we are now playing catch up. And so this year we did meet a few months ago. I'm sorry, I've lost track of time. I think it was like March that the subcommittee met. So I will pass it over to Jan to give an update on what that subcommittee talked about.
We talked about, well, we found in doing the evaluations that we were a little bit frustrated by the scoring matrix that we had. And so we met after the evaluation process was complete, just to talk about what would be a better rubric, what would be some better measures. And so we simplified the evaluation for the award quite a bit and threw out some of the things that we were using before, primarily because they were things that didn't apply to all projects. So some projects were being disadvantaged because they didn't get points for them. Things like, did they use native plants? Because a lot of the projects didn't have anything to do with native plants. They weren't planting anything. They weren't a restoration project. They were education. So we tried to redo that, and we think we've got a better framework for that. That said, if you're interested in being on the evaluation committee for this next round, we also think that it is somewhat subjective, and that any rubric we came up with would not be sufficient to really evaluate the projects, because there's a lot of things to be considered, like the creativity of the project, whether they came obstacles that arose, because just like Stephanie was talking about with the school projects, you plan a project, you think you know what you're going to do, and then stuff happens. Sometimes it's a pandemic, but sometimes it's something else. And so you always need to be flexible in your evaluation for the Golden Mangrove. So just coming up with a score and then saying, okay, the high scorer is the winner, is not sufficient. And so that's why we use that rubric as kind of an initial vetting of the projects. And then we meet afterwards to talk about why we gave each project the score that we did, and to evaluate whether which ones we really like the most. So is that what you wanted me to talk about?
Yeah, do you want to talk about the projects that you guys chose this year?
Oh yeah. We chose 2 projects because we couldn't decide. There were 2 that were excellent and we couldn't choose between them. The one that we gave, I don't know which one's top. I mean, there's 2, but they're not really, it's not like one's better than the other. But Tampa Bay Watch was actually involved in both of them. One of them was the oyster gardening project that Tampa Bay Watch did, where they threaded oyster shells onto cords, and then they hung them from docks and distributed them to homeowners. And they also put them at the marina. Is it the Gulfport Marina where they put them?
Yes.
Yeah, the Gulfport Marina, so that they had, it was a demonstration project, but also a citizen science project, because the homeowners took them home and put them on their docks, and then evaluated watched to see how many oysters colonized those hanging gardens. So that was one project. And then the other project that really impressed us, it was just a lot of heavy lifting going on with it. Also, Tampa Bay Watch was involved. They were not the lead project. They didn't submit the grant application, but the grant would not have happened without Tampa Bay Watch. The Tampa Bay Wildlife Refuges, Friends of the Tampa Bay National Wildlife Refuges, were the ones that were actually the applicant for the grant. And they worked with Tampa Bay Watch to make and move 500 of those huge concrete marine friendly oyster domes out around Little Bird Key, which is there between the Skyway Bridge and Mullet Key, between Fort DeSoto, because boat traffic and wave action was eroding this island, and it was it is a very important nesting island for wading birds. And so they had volunteers that created these oyster domes, and then they put them on a barge and transported them out to the quay, and then placed them around the one end of the quay that was eroding, which was just a Herculean effort, because they're so heavy and hard to move, and so it involved a lot of volunteer effort. So those were the two that we chose, and we think they were just both amazing projects. One is primarily education, and the other one was primarily restoration, but they're both just excellent. So we had some good projects, but those were definitely stood out from the rest, I thought.
Thanks, Jan. Any questions from the group about the new Golden Mangrove review process or the winners that were chosen? And so Jan presented the actual Golden Mangrove Award at our management, our policy board in May, I think it was.
Right. Yep.
Great. So yeah, thanks, Jan, for being there and handing those awards over. Our policy board loves that kind of stuff. So thank you.
It's good to see folks volunteering. It is really fun to read about all these projects, and it's really inspiring too that there are so many people that want to take their time to, apply for one of these grants and do all of the work to do these projects, because they really do care about making the Bay better and making their communities better. And so it is inspiring just reading the applications and then following up and reading the final reports and seeing what people did and what problems that they had and overcame. It's really a testament to their inventiveness and their persistence. And also, Sheila, I don't know if you were going to talk about it, but we did lose one of our Bay mini grant people recently in Walt Japp from the Coffee Pot Bayou Watershed Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
He had worked for USGS and FWC, I believe, right, and was retired. And he passed away recently. He had some kind of medical issue, and he was on his bicycle, and he passed away shortly thereafter. Really a big loss. He was just such a nice guy. I went out with him a couple times on some of the activities that he did. He worked with the Boy Scouts out there at Coffee Pot Bayou, removing invasives, worked on getting the water goat put in out there. He had been working with one of the schools out there to do water quality monitoring, and also with Crescent Lake Park people. So just a super guy. So that's a big loss, because he was a big contributor.
Yeah, and we're going to be working with his family and the group closely on continuing his legacy at Chris Park and Coffee Pot Bayou. So I believe the next project is going to be July 17th, which will be the first project since his passing. So if anybody is interested in coming out, just message me. I'll put my email in. We're going to need assistance with the water goat. And I mean, obviously he had a TBEP grant, but his work went well beyond that funding. He was incredibly dedicated to that community. So it is a tragedy. But would love for you all to be involved in his continued work.
Yeah, will you send me that information, Stephanie, so that I can share it with the group? Because I think that there's a lot of people that might be interested in working out there.
Yeah, and we're in the process. Obviously, things are happening a little slower than expected because he took on so much when he did his projects, right? He was spread across that area. So we're trying to hone in on doing this next step and making it, manageable. And so I will have those details within the coming week. But I know it's the 17th, and I know the primary location will be at the Coffee Pot Bayou Park. So I will get that detail out.
Okay.
I'm going to have to miss it because I'm doing a talk on aquatic plants at the library, which I think is virtual.
There will be more.
I know. Yeah, good. Keep us in the loop.
Yeah, and thanks, Jan, for bringing that up. Well, Jap was a workhorse. He was a coral biologist. So he was the type of person that every time you went over and talked to him, you would tell him about something that you wanted to do or a place you wanted to go. And he would always say that he's been there and have this whole story about this crazy adventure that he did while he was at the place or doing this or that you want to do. So Walt was an absolutely amazing guy. I went to the service, which was in Snell Isle, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I learned that their water goat has actually been officially blessed by the father. So that was pretty crazy to hear. So yeah, thanks, Jan. So now I'm going to pass it over to Joe, who is with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. So Joe, take it away.
Okay, give me 1 second to get all set up here. And Sheila, if you could just let me know that my presentation's showing up correctly, that'd be great.
Yes.
Cool. You're not seeing the GoToMeeting box in the screen, are you?
No, it is. The presentation is a little, at least on my screen, it's a little like the presentation is extending outside of our view.
I see what you mean. Let me try that one more time. And still going. All right. 1 second, let's try that out. No, okay, I'm just gonna leave it like this. People can still see it. Okay, correct? Cool. All right, yeah, so thanks Sheila for that introduction. I'm gonna be talking to you all today. First of all, good afternoon, good to see everybody. I'm gonna be talking to everybody today about the CCMP interim update. And for the people that are just joining the CAC, this will also serve as a good introduction to the CCMP. So for our new CAC members, there'll be a little introduction there too. Feeding two birds with one seed, as we like to say here at TBEP. So quick overview, in fiscal year 2022, TBEP will be updating its comprehensive conservation management plan. And if this name is new to anybody, this is one of our main guiding documents. And you'll see in the following slides what I mean by that and how it outlines a lot of the goals, actions, and activities that we end up completing or trying to complete. So the goal of this update is basically to maintain the overall plan structure. So we're not making too many changes. I'll speak a little bit more to that in a second. It's also to update actions and to reflect completed work or revised goals. One of the main focuses of this update is to focus on implementation. So figuring out the best way that we can implement the goals that we still have yet to plan or yet to set into action. And then of course, address identified gaps if needed. So currently the CCMP has 9 goals, and these are water and sediment quality, bay habitats, fish and wildlife, dredge and dredge material management, spill prevention and response, invasive species, public education and involvement, public access, and climate change. And just for everyone's knowledge, you can always view the CCMP by visiting tbep.org and checking it out there in the What Guides Us section. So you can look at the CCMP as a document that's broken into 39 actions. And you can see here I provide a just a little example of this. The goal we have here is fish and wildlife, and then to the right you can see that that goal is then further broken into actions. And understanding how that works will help in later slides when we break that down a little bit further. But this is just a real quick example of what those goals and actions look like. So of those 39 actions, 25 will be implemented through specific communication and outreach activities, with, of course, the ultimate goal being to address each one of these over a 10-year period. As you can see from the spreadsheet below, housed here are these actions and activities. And the spreadsheet also provides a general description, as well as the year in which they were completed or are still planned to be completed, and the status itself, and of course the specific project that we've tied to each activity. I don't expect everyone to read through this all right now, so I'm going to go ahead and break it down a little bit more for you. So you can get an idea of the progress that TVEP has been making by looking at the status of all of these actions. The pie chart to the right helps to visualize this. As you can see, there are 25 total actions, and 5 of those actions have been addressed or are ongoing. 6 of them are planned, and then 14 are not yet started. And so basically that's taking that table that I just showed you in the previous slide, turning it into a pie chart. So in terms of the projects that we have that are addressed or ongoing, just a few examples of these are, reducing frequency and duration of harmful algal blooms. The SEC recently created a series of red tide infographics that lean on the 2018 study they had done in Tampa Bay. Reduce nitrogen runoff from urban landscapes. We've of course talked about this in the past. The Be Floridian campaign strives to achieve that, and every summer we do a marketing push. So this, again, these are examples of projects that are either addressed or ongoing. Another one that I've talked about in recent updates to the CAC is that SSO social marketing campaign that's in the works. And so that's tied to reducing the occurrence of sanitary sewer overflows to the bay, and so on and so forth. And of course, this presentation will be made available, so you can always reference back to these to get an idea of some of the things that are going on currently with TBEP. In the planned category, we have some exciting things that are coming up. And as Sheila had mentioned earlier, the fact that we can target our Bay mini grants each year to a specific goal really helps knock out some of these actions that exist in the CCMP. So for example, expanding the use of green infrastructure practices, that's going to become the Bay mini grant priority of 2021, as Sheila had mentioned. We also have a campaign that's in the development stage right now that's geared towards satisfying that reducing propeller scarring of seagrass and pursue seagrass transplanting opportunities. That's going to be a boat propeller social marketing campaign, or seagrass scarring social marketing campaign. And then we have a couple more that are in the works that we're excited about, and we'll continue to provide updates to the CAC as we have more information as they're developed or as they are still continuously developing. And on the right here, you can see this is actually a graphic from this propeller scarring toolkit. So this isn't actually the media that we'll use to support the campaign, but it's an example of how this campaign has existed in other watersheds. So to summarize, our goals, actions, and activities are already defined by the CCMP. And so the goal of this update is less about adding to this list and more about figuring out the best ways to implement the actions that we still need to move into that planning phase. But with that being said, we will of course make space for potential additions and or refinements to these goals and actions as the interim update provides us the opportunity to do just that. So we'll take advantage of it if we decide to move in that direction. The CAC can also help to guide these decisions by providing input on these goals and actions as they currently exist, while also helping to flesh out potential refinements we've been discussing internally, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So some ways that the CAC can prepare for the update, prepare for this meeting that we're planning on, when we meet again in the fall, what are some ways that y'all can spend this time in the meantime preparing for that? And we do have some suggestions. One is starting with the strategic plan. So as you might recall from previous CAC meetings, TBEP recently updated their strategic plan for the 2021 to 2025 window. And I think a really good lens to look at this to understand the difference between the strategic plan and the CCMP, even though they're both guiding documents, the CCMP really explains what we do, whereas the strategic plan defines how we do it. So it's a really great guiding tool for the creation of any new goals that we do propose, and also just for the refinement of activities that we still need to implement. So implementing the pre-existing activities, turning them into actions. And just for anyone who hasn't gone on and checked out the strategic plan, it kind of encapsulates TBEP's visions, values, and priorities, and really represents the cornerstone strategies of TBEP, but puts them into specific and measurable terms. So it helps to take larger ideas and refine them down, or rather distill them down into more specific items. And so you can also review these, while it's important to check out the entirety of the strategic plan, make sure to spend a little bit of time with the story building strategy. And just to give you a quick idea of how that can be summed up is it's this goal to be a reliable, compelling voice for science and stewardship, recognizing that storytelling is a powerful evidence-based technique to inspire behavior change and lasting awareness of the Tampa Bay estuary. So kind of an example that I've included here of how the strategic plan works is it takes this larger idea or goal of enhancing scientific literacy. This is just one example, but enhancing scientific literacy and informing 3+ million Tampa Bay residents about the value, benefits, and importance of Tampa Bay, and also clearly connecting communication and outreach initiatives to the program's science priorities. It takes that and it breaks it down a little bit, and you can see here, follow that arrow down, that further breaking that down, it looks like trying to distill the program's work into grab-and-go content kits that we've talked about a little bit in the past. So lesson plans, messaging boxes, public summaries, things of that nature. So again, the strategic plan does a good job of taking larger ideas and then further distilling them into specific actions that are both realistic, measurable, timely, SMART goals. So to summarize, start with the strategic plan if you kind of want to get some frame of reference to think about any new goals we want to create. It would help to start there. And so finally, another thing that we could really use help from the CAC with is establishing JEDI goals. So as an NEP, National Estuary Program, we strive to protect and restore Tampa Bay for the benefit of all of its residents, recognizing the importance of implementing practices that support justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is also known as JEDI. So in other words, how can TBEP's outreach and communications priorities better meet the needs of the Bay's diverse community groups? The CAC can play a really important role in helping us establish how to best incorporate this value using the CCMP update as an opportunity to do just that. But of course, I wanted to make mention that it's important to note that establishing these goals doesn't necessarily mean making assumptions about what we think these community groups need. It involves amplifying these voices and involving them in the conversations when possible. And something I've recognized in my own personal career, this is a difficult thing to do, and it's a skill that takes refining and practicing. And so any help that the CAC can provide to us in that regard would of course be extremely beneficial. And if anybody's interested, I did include links here, more info on environmental justice, EJ, and then this is a graphic that I pulled from the JEDI Collaborative. And so in terms of actions, next things to expect, as I mentioned, we will be meeting at the CAC meeting in the fall. That will kind of be the next opportunity we have to touch base back on this and talk a little bit more, involve y'all more in the conversation. So until then, it might be a good idea to review the CCMP, maybe check out the strategic plan, refresh yourselves on what we had laid out in that 2021 to 2025 strategic plan update, and just be as prepared as you can be for this conversation when it does happen in the fall. But until then, I'd be happy to take any questions right now. Again, this presentation will be made available on the tbep.org website.
I don't have a question, but I have a suggestion. I mean, as far as the JEDI goals, it seems like one thing we could do would be to make our CAC more diverse and recruit members of those communities to serve on the CAC, where we feel like we need to do a better job of reaching out.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
We might even want to go to some of the grant recipients from the past that have been from more diverse areas and invite them to participate. Also, I saw with the specific topics for the mini grants, there was educational sites in English and Spanish, but we could also include that, the JEDI collaborative on that too.
And also Vietnamese. I mean,
Right.
Stephanie mentioned the Lelman area, and I know that the outreach that Pinellas County has done in that area has included a lot of Vietnamese language outreach materials because of the composition of that community.
Yeah, there's a large Vietnamese population in Leelman as well as Hispanic. And that's one of the conflicts we have, is sometimes we're not able to communicate effectively with some of the community members.
Yeah, I definitely say that, we recognize internally too that there are general communications practices that we can start applying that are a bit more inclusive and make our content more accessible. So even before we ask these bigger questions of, what kind of new projects can we create, there are just general best practices that we can try to start applying now. And so that's definitely a goal of mine.
I would imagine that Anna Marie at Pinellas County, Anna Marie Rivera, she may be a resource for translators for Vietnamese materials if you're looking for somebody, because I know that they had to do that.
Great, thanks for that, Jen.
I think one of the things that we're really pushing for and would probably come out, but we really, as we're working on our outreach and our education campaigns, we really are making these campaigns science-based. So really having them be targeted to, instead of just developing stuff and hoping that it works. So I think when you do that background information and that background research, specifically in like Leelman, understanding that the community is mostly Vietnamese, that would come out in that background research. So we would, before we would do any sort of campaign in a targeted area, we would have that understanding of what's the demographics of the area, what sort of languages do we need to build these educational components out in.
Does TBEP have a timeline about when you think that it will be safe and practical in order for us to do more in-person outreach? Because we've kind of been on the shelf for a year.
I think that
go for it, Maya or Ed.
I mean, I think that go ahead, Ed.
Go ahead, Maya, you can answer.
I think with vaccination rates the way that they are and the current guidance that we have, I think it's fine to begin weaving some of these face-to-face activities back into our outreach programming, as it makes sense, particularly when they're outdoors activities. I think that that's reasonable. And I think at least for these like CAC meetings or for the technical advisory committee meetings, we're having better engagement in some instances with virtual tools. And so that's the only reason we're really staying virtual. But our board meetings, as you know, Jan, are back to face-to-face. So.
Yeah, and in a similar vein, when looking to increase the diversity of the members for the CAC, I think it's mindful to consider that many folks might not be able to attend in-person meetings during this time of day. So virtual meetings make it more accessible. After 5 o'clock meetings make it more accessible for people, particularly from low-income households. So something to keep in mind.
And I'd also just remind people that not all of these community members are low income. There are many that are middle class, if not affluent, and have many interests that align with those of the program. So there are those opportunities as well, not to exclude others, but we can still be more racially diverse, if nothing else.
I do think a key component though is touching on diversity on in all spheres, both racially diverse, but also socioeconomic and geographically diverse. I think all that plays a role.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Joe, for that. Are there any other discussions, questions, comments? I think what we really wanted to bring to you guys today was sort of an awareness that we're doing this interim update and to give you an idea of what has been completed in the past and then what sort of on the books and already planned, and then hopefully looking for you guys to help us prioritize specific objectives or projects moving forward so that we can stage out the remaining activities that we need to hit in the CCMP. So start thinking about that, and if you have specific areas that you do think need to be added to the CCMP, also think about ways or activities that can be coupled with that are scientifically sound. So not just building an outreach program because it sounds good, but having that science base to back it up so that it's really going to make a difference and be successful. So, but does it, Maya, Ed, do you want to add anything to that? Okay.
The only thing I add, you heard a lot of topics and you heard a lot of the great work that's being done by both the program and all of our partners that are involved with the program. So, and much has been said both at this morning's TAC meeting and here through the CAC. It takes a village, and our village is now over 3.1 million people within the watershed, and it's a diverse village, and we want to make sure that our messages on protecting living, working, and playing in harmony with the Tampa Bay Estuary resonates across all communities, not just our core user groups or folks that are involved on our committees. We want to make sure that we're intentional with our communications and that our communications are having a reach and effect that will make an ultimate difference in the future of Tampa Bay's health. So that's our focus, and we could use your help in guiding that focus as we move forward over the next 5 years of implementing the CCMP and all the other projects we're involved with as a program.
Thanks, Ed. So with that, I think we'll move to staff announcements and roundtable. I did want to leave some space. I know that many of you have heard about the Piney Point situation that happened. But for those of you who didn't hear, from March 30th to April 9th, which seems like an eternity ago to me, the Piney Point facility in Manatee County discharged about 215 million gallons of phosphate mining wastewater into Tampa Bay. This water was nutrient rich, which so our primary concern was the nitrogen, which feeds algae blooms and can kill seagrasses, like Gary was saying and others were saying earlier. The amount of nitrogen that was in this water is basically the amount of nitrogen that this bay segment sees in an entire year. And that was discharged in just over a few days. So the TBEP staff has been, along with all of our partners, have been tirelessly working on this situation and coordinating monitoring responses, conducting interviews with press, so that you guys and the community have factual information, and then some outreach. So Joe updated the website, which gives you all of the information that you might need on Piney Point, including the news articles that TBEP was highlighted in or quoted in, an open access data portal if you're interested in seeing all of the really awesome raw data that we've been collecting over the past couple months. And then monthly monitoring summaries, which are put out obviously every month. So these basically synthesize and summarize what we are seeing in the field and what we think are the key takeaways. So with that, we'll just open it up to you guys and let you ask any questions that you might have. So yeah. Are there any questions about the Piney Point?
I don't have any questions, but just wanted to give a big kudos to the team for your presence in the media and engagement with the media. I've read and seen and heard you all over the place, and you guys are doing a great job with that. So thanks.
Thanks, Dylan.
We're still at the point where we're still living with the potential implications of that large nutrient load in the bay, as Sheila explained. And we've seen various cycles of algal blooms that have occurred right after the discharge event. And then shortly at the beginning of May, we saw different iterations of other algal species that bloomed. And now the latest manifestation, as you all are probably aware, is that we've had an intensification of red tide both in the bay and along the Pinellas County beaches. So how those loads are influencing these cycles of algal blooms is still sort of active research and investigation, but it's not very hard to do to connect the dots with where we have estimated the discharge plume to migrate away from the discharge site into lower Tampa Bay, and now into portions of Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay, and then along the Pinellas County beaches. And it's co-located in these areas where we're seeing these significant algal bloom events. So again, it's not hard to make those connections. And what our tried and true paradigm has been, as Gary was alluding to, is managing the amount of nutrients flowing into Tampa Bay from a variety of different sources. So when we exasperate the system with these excess nutrients, bad things happen, and we're seeing those bad things over the past couple of months. How we move forward as a region and fully close out the site is still, I think, under process, and I don't know if there's a clear plan for final and full closure of that site, and that's something that we continue to have to be vocal on as a community, as a estuary program, to ensure that this sort of event doesn't happen again, particularly from this facility or any other ones that might be a threat to Tampa Bay.
Thanks, Ed. I also just real quick want to introduce one of our new staff members, Jessica Lewis. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, if I can figure out how to turn my camera on, I'd love to. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm new with the estuary program. Happy to be here. I'm going to be doing a lot of just support of our different teams, whether it's the operations or policy or outreach science, all this good work that's going on in the estuary program. Just happy to be a part of it, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jessica. Welcome to the team. Jessica, I've worked with Jessica in the past at our Suncoast Rise Against Plastics. So it's great to have her on board and helping with the team. Another quick announcement. Sorry, I know we're running a little bit over, but basis abstracts, the deadline was extended to July 2nd. So if anyone is interested in submitting an abstract, please do. Some sessions you guys might be interested are debris monitoring or citizen science. I know many of your organizations do really amazing citizen science work, so make sure you submit an abstract, because this Basis 7 is going to be awesome. So you want to be part of it. And with that, I'll open it up to the floor if anybody has any announcements, questions, comments.
I just wanted to call folks' attention, like a couple of action alert kind of things. You know, we did update our habitat master plan late last year, and in that we established some restoration targets and identified opportunities for restoration further up in the watershed than we have in the past, including many freshwater wetland areas. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of two potential development threats to some of those areas. There's the USF Forest Preserve, and then there's also a proposed roadway alignment that might traverse the Lower Green Swamp Preserve in Hillsborough County. These are two areas that sort of fit the criteria for places that we're trying to preserve and some of the limited opportunities for restoration of freshwater wetland habitats, as well as pine flatwoods. So just wanted to call those two things to your attention so that you could be informed to discuss those things in the context of the Habitat Master Plan.
Maya, what roadway is that in Green Swamp? Is a new alignment?
It's the State Road 56 extension. I posted the public involvement link in the chat. There are several, it's my understanding that there are several different alignments that they're considering. One just extends the existing right of way for the existing footprint of the road, and that avoids all of the impacts to the sensitive environmental areas. Many of the alignments that were under consideration for the study are not a staff recommendation, but there is still one potential alignment that's under consideration that goes through the Lower Green Swamp Preserve. So there was a public meeting that had been scheduled earlier this month and was postponed, and they haven't released the new date yet, so they're still accepting public comment. If you go to that link, you can see the alignments. There's like an interactive mapping tool where you can post your comments about resources, environmental resources of concern, or things that they should consider in their assessment. So just wanted to make you all aware.
Anything else for the good of the group?
There are two opportunities for landscaping, sustainable landscaping type stuff. There's the Tampa Bay Water has their Tampa Bay Waterwise Awards. I know Nanette won that in the past. I think the deadline's the end of this month. And then also today, one of our Water Atlas partners sent me a link and asked me to post it about that Flip Your Florida Yard TV show. They are looking for people to have their yards flipped. So if you're interested in having them come in and re-landscape your yard using natives and that sort of thing, you can apply. And that deadline on that is July 15th.
Thanks, Jan. I'll add those to the Be Floridian posts.
Yeah. Yeah, fine. I'm not sure when the deadline is on the Tampa Bay Water one, because it's last year it was all screwed up because of the pandemic. So I know in the past I think the deadline was June 30th, but I just looked and I can't figure out when it is, but it must be on there somewhere.
When was the deadline for the Flip Your Yard thing?
July 15th. Yeah, and you have to send like a little video of your yard and pictures. If you look on the Water Atlas, I posted the story about it in the news area, and there's a link there to their website that has all the information. You have to send pictures and fill out a form.
Dan, it looks like it's still the end of June for the Waterwise Awards, because they're still saying that the on-site evaluations begin in July.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I did it last year. They didn't like my yard because I had a couple of things they wanted me to change, but I don't think I'm gonna apply again.
I think the state DEP contacts who did develop that program and show in partnership with the guy that directs it was giving a presentation at the FSA Stormwater Association, which is going on today and tomorrow, I think. So if there's any way that we could get a video that might be something to show the CAC in the future. It is a novel program, and I think it has very good utility throughout the state.
Great. Well, thanks, y'all. With that, I think we can close, and we will see you September 23rd.
In person, we hope.
In person, we hope. To be determined.
I'm sorry. Is that the 23rd or the 22nd? Because the 23rd is a Thursday.
Oh, thank you. 22nd.
It is. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jan, our biggest restriction, Jan, for in person was that Pinellas County wasn't letting Whedon use, rent out to other people. So we would have to find an alternative location.
Got it.
But that by that time that might change too. So.
Thanks, everybody. Great presentations.
Thank you.
Yep.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
See you next time. Have a good summer.
Good summer. Happy 4th.